Good morning, everyone. As we come to the end of the summer, as we've been doing all these Sunday school lessons about different themes of nature, we're going to sort of take a look back at some of the things we've talked about. And I'll probably do a couple more lessons on nature, but we're sort of coming to the end of them. So think back about all the various things that we talked about: the trees, the water, air, birds, all that, as we've sort of touched on a little bit in some of the lessons, is under threat from a variety of sources, one of which is climate change. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and what you can do about it. And there is a lot that you as an individual can do, and it might not feel like it. I know sometimes I look at everything that's going on in the world right now, and it's like, I can't do much what can I do as a single person? And just me. I can't change things. I can't make a difference, but we as individuals, we actually can, even though it doesn't always feel like it. So with climate change, one thing we can do is there's lots of little things we can do that, all these things about to be one piece of the puzzle that individually, it's very small, but if we all do them, it could have a big impact. So the changes we can make as a society, for instance, like walking or taking your bike instead of having your parents drive you somewhere in the car, can help cut CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, which can help with climate change. Now, just you doing that, it's a pretty small thing when you think worldwide, or even just in this country. But if everyone did it, that would make a big difference. So there's those little ways that you can just play a part in the larger role society plays in creating change. But you could also have way more impact than that, even than being that little individual piece of the puzzle. For instance, you could start a campaign to make other people, or help other people understand why they should be not using the car as much, right? And then more people would be walking and riding their bike, and you would be helping cut back on CO2 emissions even more. So there's this visual artist whose name is Frankie James. She is an artist and storyteller she merges science and personal activism to inspire people to do the hardest thing first, which I think is great for the planet. And she wrote an award-winning illustrated book called Bothered by My Green Conscience. And this tells the story of her selling her only car, which was an SUV, and challenging City Hall for the right to build a green driveway. And what we are going to read that book, although I want to check it out. I haven't seen it, but it looks pretty cool. You might want to look it up yourself. We're going to look at a visual essay that she wrote. And ideally, I would do this as like a story walk, which is when you put little bits of a story along a path and you walk around and you read the story as you go, which I think is really cool. But I can't do that with you guys because this is virtual. So I will just show you the story on the video as we go. And this visual essay is called "What Can One Person Do When 6.8 billion people are frying the planet?" So what could we do? Well, we could talk over coffee about global warming and the threats like heat waves and floods, food shortages, to name just a few, but you might walk the dog. Because what can one person do when 6.8 billion people are frying the planet? I could go for a walk on a sizzling summer day and think about that question. CO2 keeps rising. It's now in the danger zone, but our leaders keep loafing. Will they take action before we're all toast? Deepak Chopra says not to worry about global warming. That worries me. But maybe he really means that worry is unproductive. So take action. Whatever. I think we could use a lot more people worrying about global warming. Flip around worry and it becomes foresight. Sadly, the woolly mammoth did not possess foresight. The woolly mammoth was an early casualty of climate change. Charles Darwin wrote that it is not the strongest nor the most intelligent of the species that survive. It is the one most adaptable of change. I'll repeat that. The species that survive are those who can adapt to change. So far, man is clinging to business as usual, looking backwards and hoping that life will be as it was before. What can one person do when 6.8 billion people are frying the planet? Of course, some are being fried more than doing the frying. We should ponder the cruel irony that fossil fuels may cause extinction of mankind. I can't help worrying about myself and my family. Maybe we'd be safer in the far north. Are cities the safest place if a climate catastrophe hits? Half of the world's population live in cities. We can't all flee to escape the extreme storms, the floods, the heat waves, power blackouts, water failure, sewage backups, invasive insects, food shortages, and more. But it is a mammoth job to adapt the city to a changing and more threatening climate. How far ahead is the city planning, or the town? I asked the foreman, will those pipes be big enough to withstand a storm like the one we had in August of 2005? But he can't say. But the new pipes are not bigger than the old pipes. I wonder, do they have a plan to prepare for floods, droughts, and the extreme weather of the future? I Googled it. City Climate Change Plan, in Toronto, where she lives. And I discover they are worried too. In the last decade, Toronto has experienced more extreme heat, storms, floods, and drought, as well as the invasion of damaging insects. One storm with a giant price tag, $500 million, really caught the city's attention. The August 2005 storm was the most expensive in Toronto's history. A major road was wiped out and 4,200 homes were flooded, including the authors. In total, there were $500 million in insured losses. The insurance industry was not happy, and the city had to take action. So the city drew up a plan. It called Ahead of the Storm. It addressed storms and floods and extreme heat, drought and insects. I'm thrilled. And when I read it, the light comes on. I see how we fit into their plan. When we sold our car in 2007, we were mitigating or reducing our CO2. And when we built a permeable driveway, unknowingly, we were part of their adaptation plan to reduce stormwater runoff and floods. I love these. Permeable driveways is ways you can build driveways and parking lots too with grass, and there's a layer underneath that keeps it nice and tough so that your car doesn't ruin the grass, and it keeps it strong enough. And instead of an impervious surface like pavement, which doesn't let the water through and causes runoff, which is horrible, these are wonderful, these permeable driveways. Anyway, even the trees we planted to provide shade are in the city's adaptation plan. Now it makes sense what one person can do. Each of us needs a plan to adapt to climate change. Don't be fooled by the global leaders loafing. Local leaders around the world and cities are making plans to adapt to climate change because it's affecting them now. It's affecting all of us right now. Think of the heat we've had this summer over in Oregon, especially on the West Coast, where they've had many, many days of over 100 degrees, and people are dying because of it. So you need your own mitigation and adaptation plan to address floods, heat waves, CO2, droughts, food shortages, and the rest. So how can you take action? What is your plan? So, does your city or town have a plan? So use Google. You can use Google to find out if your region has a mitigation and adaptation plan for climate change like Toronto and New York City have. And if they don't, press your local politicians to develop one. Make your own plan. Develop your own personal mitigation and adaptation plan for yourself. There are many actions each of us can take to protect ourselves and our property from floods, heat waves, power shortages, water shortages, and the rest. So there's some resources that included in this that offer ideas for this, such as one from the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, and a handbook for reducing basement flooding, which I know lots of people have had their basements flooded in the past couple of years, so this could be really useful for them. So you'll see these links at the bottom of the page, and I encourage you to check them out. And I can include the actual links themselves in the information on YouTube and on Facebook when I post this video. And you can tap into environmental networks. So get the ball rolling by participating in environmental action or supporting these environmental organizations and others. Maybe you could volunteer with them. Save up some of your allowance and donate a bit of money to them to help them out. Now, I know in MDI, I can give you a head start. You probably know about the group, or you may not, but the group called A Climate to Thrive, I believe is what it's called. And I encourage you to Google them and look them up, and maybe I'll include the link directly to them as well. And check out what they're doing, and maybe you could get involved with them. Maybe you could talk to them and say, hey, do the towns in Mount Desert Island have a mitigation and adaptation plan for climate change? And if they don't, maybe we should encourage them to have that and work with the climate change to help do that, or check out some of the other cool things that Climate to Thrive is doing and get involved. And together we can tell our leaders to stop frying the planet. So I will leave it there for today. Hope you have a good week and get outside, do some swimming, and while it's still hot and while it's still summer. I'll see you next week.